Et avant d'accueillir les acteurs que nous aimons tant, tous ces acteurs avec qui nous avons grandi, qui faisaient presque partie de notre famille, bien sûr, nous allons rendre hommage à une personne, grâce à qui nous sommes tous là. C'était un homme merveilleux, dans la vie et à l'écran. C'était bien sûr l'interprète du merveilleux Charles Ingalls, mais c'était aussi le principal scénariste de la série. C'était aussi le principal réalisateur de la série. C'était aussi le producteur exécutif de la série. Autrement dit, la série La Petite Maison dans la Prairie n'existerait pas sans lui. Et nous ne serions pas là, tous réunis, sans lui. Mesdames et messieurs, une immense ovation à Michael Landon. Mesdames et messieurs, et La Petite Maison dans la Prairie, nous l'avons regardé quand nous étions plus jeunes sur des petites télévisions. Ensuite, nous l'avons regardé sur de plus grandes télévisions. Et est-ce que vous seriez intéressé si on regardait juste quelques petites minutes sur un magnifique écran géant? Alors c'est parti!
Aujourd'hui, l'installation.
Si je devais écrire mon journal, je commencerais par le jour de notre arrivée à Plum Creek. Je n'ai que j'y aperçu à mon réveil. J'ai vu papa discuter avec M. Hanson. Et je me demandais de quoi il pouvait bien parler.
Oh non, voyons, en écoutant, M. Ingalls, et moi, si j'étais à votre place, je réfléchirais une bonne nuit avant de répondre.
Non, pas la peine, monsieur Hanson, j'ai tout bien réfléchi. Je vais à la ville demain à la première heure pour signer les papiers.
Bon, d'accord. Alors, à demain.
Attendez.
Hein?
Et merci encore.
Non, c'est moi.
Oh, la petite famille, quand vous aurez les pieds assez rafraîchis, il faudra décharger le chariot.
On a une maison.
On a une maison.
Papa a emprunté la scie de M. Hanson pour construire notre future maison. Pat et Patty, nos deux chevaux, n'étaient pas assez forts pour tirer la charrue dont papa avait besoin pour retourner le sol de la prairie. Alors, un peu tristement, papa a demandé à M. Hanson de nous les échanger contre une paire de bœufs, suffisamment costauds d'après papa pour retourner la terre du pays jusqu'à la mer. Papa rentrait à la maison à la tombée de la nuit et il travaillait à la lueur d'une lanterne. Maman disait qu'il mangeait tout en sciant ou en clouant. Ça devait être vrai. Comme tout ça se passait la nuit, la maison poussait comme les champignons qu'on trouvait dans les bois. Tout le monde retenait son souffle. Et puis un matin, notre maison a été prête. On peut entrer alors?
Attendez une seconde.
Charles! Lâche-moi, on est entré dans la maison une centaine de fois.
Pas comme aujourd'hui. Aujourd'hui, c'est spécial.
On peut faire notre lit maintenant?
Bien sûr.
Va lui donner un coup de main.
On n'avait jamais eu un lit aussi grand. Et une jolie chambre rien que pour nous. On a une fenêtre rien qu'à nous. On verra les étoiles dans le ciel.
Mais malheureusement, on est tout endormis quand elles sont dans le ciel.
Ce qui sera vraiment bien, ce sera d'entendre la pluie tomber et de savoir que rien ne va tremper.
Il paraît que tu devais me donner un coup de main.
Une fenêtre rien qu'à nous.
Un vrai plancher. Des vitres à toutes les fenêtres. Une chambre pour les filles, une pour nous.
Et le principal, une porte qui se déroule.
Oh oui. Les coyotes peuvent hurler la nuit, je n'aurais plus peur.
On les a souvent entendus, et si tu as eu peur, je ne l'ai jamais remarqué.
Et pourtant, c'est fini maintenant.
On n'aura plus à craindre le mauvais temps. Hein, il reste beaucoup de travail et il nous faut un tas de choses.
D'abord une charrue et une herse. Karine!
C'est un peu haut pour toi. Faut pas grimper toute seule. Je m'inquiète pas trop pour la herse, je peux en bricoler une qui ne fait pas grave, mais le plus ennuyeux, c'est la charrue. J'irai en ville demain.
Oui, mais on n'a pas d'argent.
Ah, ne fais pas de soucis, j'ai toujours su me débrouiller.
C'est vrai.
Écoute,
Karine!
je reviens.
Hé, Carrie, qu'est-ce que tu fais là? Elle a réussi à grimper l'échelle.
Eh ben alors, petit monstre, on veut explorer les greniers. Elle va bientôt être aussi grande que vous. Alors, ça vous fait?
Oui, papa. Elle est formidable.
Allez, un peu de place. Le matelas est plus doux que celui que j'ai fait pour vous. Alors, et cette chambre?
Magnifique. Oui. Et tu sais ce que j'ai appris?
Non, mais je vais le savoir.
Une maison, c'est ce qu'il y a de mieux sur la terre.
Oui, ce qu'il y a de mieux, tu as raison. Elle te plaît, la maison? Bon. Alors, tout va bien.
Mesdames et messieurs, quand nous l'avons connue, elle n'était qu'un bébé, une petite blonde dans les bras de Caroline Ingalls. Elle est devenue une jeune femme merveilleuse. Aux États-Unis, elle est l'une de celles qui participent le plus à continuer à faire vivre la légende de la petite maison dans la prairie et notamment ses valeurs morales et religieuses. Mesdames et messieurs, une ovation pour Wendy Lou Lee. Elle était enfant quand on l'a connue. Dans un épisode, on ne savait pas à l'époque qu'elle était la fille du créateur de la série. Elle est apparue régulièrement tout au long de la série dans différents personnages. Et dans la dernière saison, elle était carrément l'institutrice de One Note Love et Taboo. Elle est la fille de Michael Landon dont nous avons parlé tout à l'heure. Mesdames et messieurs, n'hésitez pas à vous lever et à accueillir celle dont son père serait tellement fier aujourd'hui, tellement fier de voir la merveilleuse personne qu'elle est devenue, Leslie Landon. avait que des filles. Il n'y avait que des filles. Et on avait envie qu'un garçon, et Michael Landon l'a compris. Et il a trouvé un jeune acteur absolument merveilleux. Michael Landon a adoré ce jeune acteur. Et nous l'avons tous énormément aimé. Il a énormément apporté à la série à partir de la 5e saison. Il est là pour nous aujourd'hui, Matthew Labordeaux.
C'est Albert. C'est énorme. Oh la vache, c'est énorme.
Vous l'avez tous détesté. Vous l'avez tous haï. Quand vous regardez La Petite Maison de la Prairie, vous n'avez qu'une envie, traverser votre écran de télévision pour aller lui filer une bonne paire de claques. La fesse la plus célèbre de la télévision, l'inimitable Alice Hollande. Comment accueillir la prochaine actrice? Elle nous a tellement émus. Le moment dans La Petite Maison de la Prairie où elle devient aveugle est l'un des plus célèbres moments de l'histoire de La Petite Maison de la Prairie. Elle est aussi l'une des plus discrètes actrices de l'histoire d'Hollywood. Elle a fait le choix depuis très longtemps de vivre une vie en dehors du show business. Aujourd'hui, mesdames et messieurs, ce week-end, c'est la première fois qu'elle participe à une réunion des acteurs de La Petite Maison de la Prairie. Aux États-Unis, ce n'est jamais arrivé. Elle nous fait cet honneur pour nous aujourd'hui. Mesdames et messieurs, accueillez-la avec l'ovation qu'elle le mérite. La merveilleuse Mélissa Anderson. Et il reste encore un magnifique siège ici. Et bien sûr, vous savez qui va bientôt nous rejoindre sur scène. Elle est évidemment peut-être la maman la plus célèbre, de la télévision. On a tellement aimé la douceur de Caroline Higgins, la force de Caroline Higgins, son amour pour ses enfants. Elle nous a tellement émus, elle a accompagné nos vies pendant toutes ces années. Je vais l'accueillir sur scène avec la vraie prononciation de son nom. Parfois, on se trompe dans la prononciation de son nom. Donc, par respect pour elle, je vais l'appeler avec la vraie prononciation. Mesdames et messieurs, elle nous fait l'honneur, l'immense honneur d'être avec nous aujourd'hui, Karen Krasny. Je vais dans quelques instants laisser la place à Alexis qui va conduire l'interview et la rencontre. Mais juste avant que je parte, je pense qu'une chose qu'on pourrait faire à tous ces acteurs, c'est peut-être leur chanter le générique de La Petite Maison de la Prairie.
La 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 la.
bonjour, merci beaucoup d'être venu. Je suis très content d'être là. Pour la Prairie, les 50 ans. Déjà, ma première question, c'est qu'est-ce que ça vous fait de fêter les 50 ans de la série? Est-ce que vous faites ça encore en 2024? I can speak English if you want for that. I mean, how do you feel to celebrate the 50th anniversary of David Arrows on the Prairie in 2024 with all those fans? How do you feel? There is some. Hello? Bonjour?
Bonjour.
First of all, thank you all so much for coming out and celebrating our show that we love so much. It's been 50 years, and you ask what it means to us. And for me personally, it was a wonderful childhood. I adored Michael Landon. I had a father, of course, of my own, but I loved Michael as a second father. And my children have grown up watching Little House on the Prairie. My godchildren have grown up watching Little House on the Prairie. And of all the shows when I was young that I would have thought might have endured and might have gone on, that Little House is the one that really has endured more than any of them. It seems appropriate and seems right, because it was such a beautiful, wonderful show.
And do you have a memory of your first day on the set? And what was your first memory, your first impression of the set? I don't know if someone wants to decide if you.
Hi, I think. Thank you all for coming. Yes, it was interesting actually because we shot out of order. We usually didn't do that. We shot episode 2, Country Girls, first, and then we shot Harvest of Friends, I believe, which was episode 1, which is what you saw. I think my first scene was, and first day was, I think, in the schoolhouse. So I think we may have all been together, Allison and a lot of our cast of kids. And yes, I think that's right, because I remember Allison was really, really, believe it or not, really shy, or really scared, one or the other, probably both. And she was like so cute. She was wearing her own hair at that time. I don't think you had a wig then, and her own little curls, and she was glued to looking down. Her eyes were down, and the director kept saying, "Look up, Allison! Look up, Allison!" And we were all, I think we were all thrilled and excited and scared, but they made us feel comfortable, and I think we all had a great time, and it was just very interesting even to us at that time. That we were, this isn't really the first show. This is the second show, but we're doing this first for whatever reason, and la la la. But yeah, that was I think the schoolhouse was the first day for me.
I think I only looked up to glare at you and Melissa and say, "Country girls don't even know what a blackboard is." Scowl at you. Yeah.
I recall that my first day shooting for Little House on the Prairie was on location, because we were shooting the pilot and the family had to leave Wisconsin and travel they knew not where. And so we were up in the mountains in the snow, at over 5,000 feet in the mountains, and the trees, huge trees, were laden with snow, and we were all meeting each other and wondering what was going to happen. And of course we'd read the script, but here were trucks with men in jackets and all kinds of equipment and a big crane going up and down with Michael on it. And finally, they said, we're ready. And so we made our little walk up to where there was a little cabin with a little light inside and two old people who were playing my parents. And we were going to get on the wagon and leave forever, maybe never to see that home again. And so we went up there, and all the girls were put in the wagon, and, you know, Mike enthusiastically lifting everybody. And then I learned how to get myself up on the wagon using the wheel. And suddenly I realized this is the moment that this woman is saying goodbye to her parents, probably forever. And I became so moved by her story and the feeling of trust that she had in the husband to just go into the wilderness, you know, without knowing what would happen. That was the day that I fell in love with Carolyn, the character.
And for you?
First, of all the people here, I think I was the outsider coming in because I joined the show when it was already a tremendous hit, and I watched it with my family before I joined it. But do you all know that I played two characters? Yes? Some do, some don't. Oh, of course, you're all fans of the show. So I played Charles Ingalls as a little boy, and I believe it was the third season. A Journey in the Spring. Yes. So Paul, his father, was ill. He took a journey back, and on the train he reminisced of his childhood, where I played him as a little boy. And it was such a beautiful show. The next season, Michael wrote an episode called I Remember, and asked me again to play the part where Ma met Paul, and as children in grade school. And it was such a beautiful, sweet episode. And then the following year, they moved to Winoka, and they met Albert, who was the orphan on the streets of Winoka, and I eventually became the son. But just, I remember where Carolyn and Charles first met as young children in grade school. It'd been many years since I'd seen it, and I was recently with my best friend, who's probably played, I know he's played here many times. His name is Joshua Bell. He's a very famous classical violinist, and I was visiting him and his family on his farm in the United States, and his sisters all grew up in Little House on the Prairie, so we want to watch a show, please. And I said, well, let me pick. And I said, let's watch this show, I Remember. And at the end of the show, everyone was sobbing. Everyone was crying. It was such a beautiful show, and it holds up today. It was still beautiful.
So it's thanks your first character that you have the role of Albert. Is that? It's thanks to your first character, because you were in the Little House on the Prairie before. So it's thanks to that role that you had the big role after.
I believe so. You'd have to ask Michael Landon or someone else, but it just seemed appropriate and was a very easy transition. And of course, everyone on the show welcomed me, and I felt very comfortable and safe and welcome, and it was perfect. It was beautiful.
I can remember my dad talking about Matthew at the dinner table and just how incredibly talented he is. And so it didn't surprise any of us that he was going to go on and play another character in Little House. My dad absolutely loved him.
And for you, how was it to play in the show of your father? How was it? Because it would be extraordinary to be part of that.
So I actually had a lot of fun. I got to be in a few different episodes, but the one that was probably the most special was the first one that I ever got to act in, which was The Plague. And I played a dying girl, excuse me, in the church. And the scene was with my dad, and he gave me my name, Leslie. And I remember when we were doing the scene together, he got too emotional over my character, and I remember him saying, "I'm sorry, I have to do this again. I can't get as emotional over you. I have to pretend you're not my real daughter." And I just remember we drove to work together, and we drove home together, and I was on cloud nine. It was such a special day.
And for you, do you remember?
Well, no, I don't remember, because I was only about 9 months old. But my first episode was your first episode, Matt, as in Winoka, because most people don't know this, but Baby Grace was not me. When you had us, that wasn't me. That was a little boy. Yeah, because they hadn't found us yet. So, and that baby is way too big to be a newborn, I must say. I think we were smaller in Winoka than we were in the Little House. So, yes, Little House has been a part of my life, all 47 years of it, and what a honor to be on stage with these lovely family members.
Do you have a favorite plots in the series? Because there are so many plots with so many plots, and do you have one plot that you love?
One episode?
Yeah, one episode or one plot.
I still love the pilot for number one, but a lot of people like to hear about Olsen versus Olsen, which is much later in the show, where a friend of mine and I developed a plot that would be about women getting their rights. Because at that time, I was working very hard for the Equal Rights Amendment in the United States, which we still don't have. And we thought, how could we... how could we get this message out to more people in the public, and developed this show that was based on a real legal case of women having common property with their husbands. And of course, Mr. and Mrs. Olsen came to blows over that because she thought she owned the place. And no. And he wasn't about to sign that petition giving her rights. For once, he had a little power, you know. And so you remember we all went on strike and moved into the restaurant, and we had a big slumber party. It was so fun, and it was the only time that Harriet and I got to be pals, and we had such a good time.
Well, and they moved, into my hotel, and I'm very proud to say, if you recall, Percival was the first man to sign the document agreeing to give women equal property rights in Walnut Grove. Yeah. I have a good one.
I should add that I got momentarily, I think it's because we're all here, and you said your first memory of Little House. I forgot about the pilot. Of course, I don't forget about the pilot. That would have been the first memory of Little House. I'm sorry about that. One of the best memories best and not best memories though of the pilot was we shot a scene in the rain. And I think they made rain. It rained a lot anyway, but it wasn't raining. The rain didn't read on camera. You couldn't see it, I think, and they had to make more rain. And we were all drenched in this scene. and we all were shuttled back to our dressing rooms to change clothes and warm up. And I think my mother was on a different van than I was, and I was with Karen, or Karen was there anyway. And I got to the steps of we all had little steps up to our dressing rooms, and we're all just soaking wet. It's very hard it's slippery, and Karen came and helped me. She was as cold and wet as I was, but she did that. It's very nice.
Wow.
For all of this, it was our childhoods. I mean, as actors, we've been in other shows, but this was our childhoods for us. And I know, okay, for me, my favorite part of the show, yes, my favorite episode, you all know, it's the one where the down the hill. Yeah, Bunny. And it's because in that one, Millie is so awful. Normally, Millie, I did terrible things just to Laura. But in Bunny, I infect the entire town. Doc Baker, I make my parents cry, and Charles Ingalls has to drop what he's doing and go make me a wheelchair, and just everyone gets dragged into Millie Olsen's terrible, awful drama in that episode. And then I get pushed in a wheelchair, which I don't know anyone who's done that. Did they do that on the Waltons? Did they do it on the Brady Bunch? No. Nobody on any show I've ever seen got pushed down a hill in a wheelchair into a pond. So I would say that's my favorite episode, yeah.
Your aunt was really good, no?
Yes, that's right. I had, you remember, Millie had the cast where, she's pretending that her legs don't work, but her arm's really broken. Just about a week or so before we shot the episode, I was skateboarding. And I wasn't that good at it, but I liked it, and I fell over. And this was the 1970s when we didn't wear wrist pads or helmets or anything, very crazy. And I broke my arm. For real. And so I had to come in with my cast, and Michael was like, oh dear. He signed my cast, and he said, if you do this again, I'll break the other one. But he said, okay, we'll do this. I said, all right. He says, you're in a wheelchair, we'll say you really broke him. So Dr. Baker put a fake 1800s cast over the real modern cast, and away we went. So yeah.
And for you, Matthew, you have a favorite episode,
I would say just for too many to choose, but for purely selfish reasons, just personal selfish reasons. My brother Patrick was on Little House on the Prairie as Andy Garvey, and there were several seasons where Laura, Andy, and Albert all sort of had adventures together. And those were all so much fun. There was one episode called Men Will Be Boys where Albert and Andy go off to prove they're men, while the fathers, Jonathan and Charles, tag behind them out of sight, waiting for them to fail. But they actually never fail. They actually pull it off. And just selfishly, it was so much fun to be able to share that time with my brother and act together. And another very best friend of mine from childhood, I'm godfather to both of her daughters, is an actress named Melora Hardin, who played my girlfriend twice on the show. The second time on the very last episode that I did, where I climbed the hill onto the top at the end, and it was I never passed away during the show, I never died, but it was sort of implied that I was not going to make it. And I think I'm dead, but maybe not. Maybe I'm living somewhere under an assumed name or something. But you might also know Melora Hardin. Later on in her career, she was on the American version of The Office, playing Michael Scott's, Steve Carell, his boss, Jan, his crazy boss. So that is the same actress, and we're still friends today.
I have a question for you, because you have wrote many of the plots. So do you have a memory of him writing some plots and have an idea? How he had so many ideas about that. Do you have memories about he writing some?
Yes. We We used to, is that all right? I'm sorry, were you asking Leslie?
No, you can answer a story. No.
I have wonderful memories of my dad early in the morning. He was an early riser, and I would also get up early because I was a good student then. And I would get up to study, and I would be in the kitchen, and I could hear my dad talking to himself. And I always knew that's how he would create his dialogue before he would write it. He would play both parts, and he would do the dialogue out loud. And then my dad had these large yellow memo pads, and he was left-handed, and he wrote everything out on these. He didn't use a typewriter, he just wrote everything out. And then he had a wonderful secretary for many, many years, Evie Malouf. And she was amazing because no one could read my dad's handwriting. He really should have been a doctor. And so yeah, he loved what he did. Writing was a massive passion for him, and it started on Bonanza. So writing, directing, those were things that he had learned early on the set of Bonanza. So it was wonderful to see him create these stories.
Yes, Karen.
I love that about the yellow pads, because he told me that when you would all go on vacation in Hawaii, he would sit beside the pool while you children were playing, and he would number the pages 1 through 13, and then he would fill them with scenes, just like that. Unbelievable. And then I got to have a participation with him in some of that creation, because in the late afternoon, frequently, after the children had gone home, we would do our scenes, because, you know, the children have to have limited hours so that we don't abuse them. And we would sit there in those director's chairs and smoke cigarettes and talk about, oh, maybe we could do this in the scene, or maybe we could do that. And what was very rewarding for me was that he was open to suggestions about what a woman might do in those circumstances. And I based a lot of what I did on my mother, because she was from a very hard scrabble background and had been a one-room school teacher and was an excellent, excellent mother, which I actually can't say about myself. But I would say, well, you know, my mother wouldn't just sit and look at the fire and look mournful when she was worried about something. She would get up and clean that house, and every drawer would be clean. And he said, that's great. And then we'd use it. And so it was very rewarding, you know, those times, especially in the early years.
Thank you. I have a question for you. Which character would you like to play among all these characters? If I can tell you, you can play one character of Little House on the Prairie. Which one do you choose and why? Yeah. Yes.
Well, Ma, of course. Yes, hands down, no question about it.
And why? Because why do you choose Ma?
The strongest, most loving, caring woman ever. Yeah, I mean, so strong and so soft at the same time. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
I know for me, I definitely would have either wanted to play Laura or Mary, because I was around there, we were all about the same age, and I remember talking to my dad and just saying, oh, I wish I could be on the show, because I so badly wanted to also play his daughter. And so I think that's when he knew I really wanted to act, and therefore my first part was playing. And that was the start. He saw how much I really loved the children characters, and I love the books. I grew up reading all the books, and it was just such a love for me, the children.
Okay, thank you.
I would say the first thing that pops into my mind is to play Charles Ingalls, but no one can play that Michael Landon. He was one of a kind, and no one will ever recreate that. He was just that special. I could have pulled off Willie, I think. Right? I sort of look like Willie. It's about the right age. And the one question I'd love to ask all of you, because that was one of the very first episodes, Albert was not on it yet. I've never heard my voice of the actor that translated for me, that dubbed into French. Was it? I'm sure it was a wonderful actor. And did the voice sound similar to mine, or was it very different? Yes, that's good. Because the actor that played Michael Landon's voice and dubbed into French was wonderful and sound very much like Michael Landon. It almost could have been Michael Landon, just the tone of his voice and the sound of it.
Yeah, the jobs in France are the best because there are some actors, and I think it's, for all of you, the job is perfect in French.
The dubbing for Little House is marvelous. I always said the dubbing for Mrs. Olsen, it sounded like Catherine McGregor flew over here and did it herself. It's completely dead on. Who would I be? I've always thought the character of Miss Beadle, Mademoiselle Beadle, was marvelous. I would like to have played the teacher. Nellie's the only woman on the show who didn't teach. The only one who didn't teach. Laura taught, Mary taught, everybody taught. I didn't teach. So yes, I can stand in the corner. It would be good. I think now, of course, as I'm older, absolutely, I think I would have a really good time playing Mrs. Olsen, playing Harriet. I could absolutely do that.
Do you want to be on?
I've been thinking, and I think it would have ended up being one of the guys. Yeah. Because naturally you would think, and Allison, Nellie, because Mary was always so good that nobody's that good. So it would have been nice to be more like Nellie. But I think overall, to really have longevity, I think I would have to be one of the guys, not Michael, but no, can't have his hair. No one has hair like Matthew, except Mike. Yeah. I think it would. Sorry, what did you say? Oh, yes. I love it. Yes. And I have a memory, I should add this. I have a memory of Victor French, who played Mr. Edwards, early memories on, thank you, in Sonora, where we shot the pilot, sitting, and he would have his coffee, and I think I was having hot chocolate or something for breakfast before we would leave, and he said that he would put his spoon in his coffee cup. And I asked him, Victor, why do you do that? It's just sitting there. And he said, it's conducting the heat away from the coffee so I can drink the coffee faster. I was like, oh, okay. But no, he was just a lovely, and so different. He was a lovely man, I should finish. And so different from his character. What a great actor. And very, very, very nice person.
Yes, I would have loved to play Mrs. Olsen. The characters with flaws are so interesting and fun to play. And if slightly evil, so much the better. So as you can imagine, I rarely got to play the villain, but when I did, I was so happy. And I too would have liked to play Victor French's part and play Mr. Edwards and be loose and free. Mary and Carolyn were kind of corseted, weren't we? And that gets very old, being good. I tried to develop a script for the show called Too Good to Be True, where Carolyn would have a nervous breakdown from being so good. But Obviously, they didn't buy it.
And speaking of the villain, Alison, you said in many interviews that you love horror movies. So for you, play a villain was a dream come true for you, you know?
Oh, absolutely. As a little girl, I remember even watching the video production, the Broadway production of Peter Pan, and they had it on TV when I was really little. And I remember thinking, what a great character Captain Hook was. He was marvelous. And I liked villains, and I liked horror movies, and I'd watch them, I thought the villain would be cool. And so I played some nice children occasionally. And then that's why when I read for Little House, as soon as I read the script and saw that she was just, girl was awful, that I was playing the villain, I was very excited about that. I thought, wow, what a thing to do. And so young to be given the villain role. I thought I would have to wait years to play that. Of course, I didn't realize that people were going to, hate me for the next 50 years. It was a little jarring, but you like me now, so it's all worked out good. So, okay.
And for our podcast, I think it will be very funny because she plays a villain and she is very adorable in real life. So the contrast between shooting yourself and becoming the real life, the contrast would be very tough and mind-blowing, no?
Well, one of the things I loved is in the Percival episodes, when Percival shows up.
No, I mean on the set because you're playing a villain, and shooting the set where, yes, and when the camera is cut.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing. That's why I liked Percival, because remember I was nice to him and then terrible to everyone else. I got to go back and forth, which I liked. And I remember it was Katie Kurtzman, who played Caroline when you were in that episode. She played the poor little girl who stuttered on the show. And she and I even talked about that I was so horrible to her when she's stuttering and I'm saying St. Peter Piper, picked a peck of pickled peppers, and I can't hear you, and it's really awful. And she even said that we would do the scene, and then when they said cut, I'd say, so should we go to 7-Eleven for Slurpees or get ice cream after? And she said it was really jarring because I was so evil, and then they'd say cut, and I go, so what are you doing for lunch? And she's like she got whiplash because I was so different off camera.
I will add, because Alison cannot say this of herself, so I'll say it for her. Alison was so sweet and charming and wonderful and nice when the cameras were not rolling. She was so funny, meant to be a comedian, as she made an entire career out of, and is still performing for people and making them laugh. She was meant to do that her whole life. And Mrs. Olsen, Catherine McGregor, who's no longer with us, she's passed, but she was a love of a person when the camera stopped. When the camera rolled, you loved to hate her, but when the camera stopped, you loved to love her.
I want to know that in which aspects do you look like your character? Do you have any common points with your characters, or are they totally different from your real personality?
A couple years ago, I finished and published a memoir, and I asked members of the cast to please read it and give me a quote to help sell it. And Alison read the book and then said, oh dear, the fans aren't going to like this at all. And then the quote I think that she gave me was, hold on to your hats. She's nothing like Carolyn Ingalls. And actually that was true at the time, because I was a feminist. I was out there marching. I was having a lot of drinks after work. I was having a number of boyfriends, and it was an exciting time in my life, and I was learning a lot. So No, I didn't have the stability, the compassion, the maturity of the character. But thank God, I knew how to act. And I had a great role model in my mom, so it worked out.
If they're expecting this book to be, hello, I'm Caroline, they're going to fall over in a dead faint because she tells the truth. She talks about everything in that book. And I think it would be quite the shock. If you really thought she was just Caroline Ingalls, you will be completely shocked. Yes.
And you, Lisa?
I think like I said, no one is as good as Carolyn or Mary. But I think the fact that she was studious and careful, and I was similar in that way. I was quiet, and I guess Mary was probably a bit shy too. So I had that, but yeah, it's always interesting to me because I read the books like Leslie was talking about. I read the books as a little girl. When I found out that I had an interview for the show, for the pilot, I didn't know it was for Little House. All I heard was it was a pioneer Western. And I was a pioneer Western, okay? And I think I wore a gingham shirt in honor of Western, I guess. But when I found out, when they told me it was Little House, and I think Al Trisconi, who became a good friend of my family's after at NBC, said, did you ever read these books? Have you read these books? I said, yes. and I immediately knew they must be considering me for Mary, because it made sense. I had blonde hair. But I often think that Laura, as an older woman, much older woman, wrote the books at that time. And what stands out, what stood out to her so much at that age is what she wrote, what she remembered. And so she remembered those good qualities, and there, I'm sure, is much more to those characters that we don't know, but that was her memory. And so, it was interesting, and that's what I always say too when people say you deviated so much from the books. We had to. We wouldn't have a show that went on and on if we didn't. But also, it's nice to think you can invent a little and make characters more, maybe more interesting, deeper. So, anyway.
Thank you.
What I remember so well is how you really were studious in the same way that Mary was, because maybe for her it was the test she needed to take, but for you it was playing the part and doing it well. And so where she would study late at night, you were doing research on what it would be like to be blind, and took your work very, very much to heart, and were a dedicated actress at such a young age. And so I think it's that inner core, that came across.
A point in common. I'm just completely like Nellie Olson. Exactly the same. I do love peppermint sticks. Yes. I guess it's so weird because so many things about Nellie were different for me. I'm not attacking stuttering children and blind people. I like jeans and tennis shoes, baskets and jeans and t-shirts, and Nellie was in the beautiful frilly clothes. And one of the days in See Me, Jess used to work like that. One of my friends came to the set and said, I think this is the longest I've ever seen you wear a dress. So yes, it was very strange for me to play this character who lived so differently than I did.
So we have a last surprise for you. It's a cake for celebrate the anniversary of the Little House on the Prairie. So I think we can go on. It's just a surprise. Je pense que le gâteau peut arriver. It's okay. Le gâteau, le gâteau, le gâteau.
Merci pour votre soutien. Mesdames et messieurs, merci à tous.